Virtual Masterclass, Speaking with Confidence. My name is Nick Old. I'm Managing Director of Speakers Corner and delighted to be your host today. So about a year ago, I got approached by Penguin to be part of their Penguin Business Expert series and write a book about public speaking. The thesis that I put together was that we can all public speak. In this fear of glossophobia and public speaking that we all exist in, actually there are certain tricks and traits you can take in order to help you. And it revolved around three main areas: having the right environment to speak in, owning the content that you're delivering, and turning that content into stories will help you be able to deliver the right speech. In my journey of writing the book, I got to speak to some of our favourite speakers and understand from them what they could be doing, or what they do in order to help them with their speaking. And today's masterclass, I'm delighted to bring together four of those incredible experts who are going to share their stories alongside powerful insights to help you and your team build their presentation and communication skills in a time where we need to invest in this more than ever. As we go through, please send us questions in the chat box. This virtual masterclass is slightly different from our usual ones in the sense of I'm going to be with the speakers and be interviewing them as we go through. So please send us the questions and I'll incorporate them in. And if we have time at the end, then we'll bring them all back together and we'll have a good panel discussion. So let's get straight on with the first speaker. Drawing on real-life examples as one of London's youngest CEO at the age of 26, Nigel Risner will share with us how your team can benefit from the interplay of its different members using his animal theory to help boost your business's communications while we work remotely. Welcome, Nigel, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much indeed for inviting me. What an honour to be part of a masterclass with such amazing other speakers. I feel honoured and trusted. It's a delight to have you here, Nigel. I think we should start. Tell us a bit about your animal theory, the different types of animals, and also, bear in mind what we're talking about today, how they communicate and what we can learn from them. So I was doing a presentation just as a background for a junior Chamber of Commerce at Whipsnade Zoo in one of those side rooms. And in the corner of my eye, I saw this man walking with a trolley with about 6 different buckets of food. And what I saw was they were labelled monkeys, giraffes, tigers, lions, elephants, etc. And I realised that this man knew what food to feed what animals. And if he knew what food to feed the animals, he knew how to get the best out of them. And I had one of those aha moments where I thought, I wonder if we could do the same with communication, where if we identified the people we work with and we really understood their needs, their personal needs, their traits, and we became, get ready for this, Nick, this is a new word for you, the zookeeper, we could then transform the way we communicate. Now let's use the panel. We've got a phenomenal panel here. So you've got you, Nick, running the show as what I call the classic lion, and it's your show. And you got me as a monkey, okay, who's not quite sure what I'm doing, and I'm a bit all over the place. And when people ask, is this a green screen? It's not. And I've got masks and I've got books and my office has got all different stuff. And then we've got some other speakers, and we've definitely got Colin, who I think is probably going to be an elephant with lion tendencies. And we've got Maggie, who I probably think is a dolphin, and Daisy, who could be another animal. I'll come to that. We've got all these different animals in your panel, and your job, Nick, is to be a zookeeper and to keep us in check. Now, you can only do that if you know our traits. And too often in organizations, and I'm going to upset you, Nick, a little bit, you have speakers sharing a message, which is a phenomenal message if the audience understood it. So you've got 100 people in an audience, and let's divide them by 4. It's not going to be an exact science. But the lines in your audience want a short piece of information. They can plagiarize it. They can take back to their office, and it's 7 tips to making the world a better place. That's all they want. They don't want some long story. Then you've got someone like me as a monkey. I want a funny video. I want to see a YouTube clip of some funny advert. It might be rude. It might not be politically correct, but I think it's funny. And it's going to make me laugh and smile and get me involved. And I'm one of these people, I'm quite happy when the speaker asks how many people in this room, and it's interactive. Then you've got the elephants who don't want any interaction whatsoever. And what they want is the questions in advance. They want a PDF, a WinZip attachment, and they do not want any interaction whatsoever. And then you've got the dolphins in the audience who want to make sure we're all having a lovely time. And is there lunch and tea? And is there something I can take home for the children? Now, if you think that's who's an average audience, and if you're a boss, you're a manager, you're a leader, and you're working with your team, you've got to know who you're speaking to. So I've worked in your office a few times, Nick, and I know that some of your people want to know in advance what I'm going to say because they don't want any shocks or surprises. And you know that. And there are others that want me to bring my animal hats and they want me to bring my chocolate. And that is a full, but it's still full, by the way. But they want me to bring chocolate and they want to have loads and loads of fun. But the real question is the challenges that we're all facing right now with remote workers. And so someone like me, I love flying. I love going to an audience in advance. I love speaking. I like meeting people. And I want to hug the organizer. I'm so grateful they've booked me. Instead, I'm sitting in North London on a screen talking to myself. And after 25 minutes, it goes blank and I've gone. And then I've got to go back to the wife. I mean, I love her, but not that much. But I mean, I've been with her for 40 years now. I want to be interacting with an audience. So we need to think that you've got remote workers who are sitting at home and they're 4 different animals. The monkeys can only work at home for about 20 minutes before they're going to put on can't pay, won't pay, or homes under hammer. Literally, you've got about 20 minutes. The lions are going to work very well between 7 in the morning and 8:30. The elephants have loved this. They probably brought on the pandemic. They've loved this. They haven't got to see anyone, speak to anyone. They can just be at home 8 hours on Zoom. They love it. And the dolphins have got to be caring, and they often have it's nothing to do with male or female. They'll have children needs. There'll be parental needs. You know, I'm a middle. I've got a father around the corner who's 87. I've got to look after. I've got a son who's 34, who's just had a baby. There's different needs. We have to understand in communication, Nick, that if you're going to get a message across, whose language are you speaking in?
Can I ask, are each individual, are we aware of who we are, or does it need to be pointed out to us?
Well, that's a really great question. So often we've never done any personality profiling. And I'm not saying you have to do personality profiling, but I could guarantee I could watch Daisy, Maggie, Scott, and Colin speak for literally a minute. I will hear their language because the greatest communicators are really the greatest listeners. And most speakers and most leaders don't listen well enough. The last 3 letters of listen is 10, T-E-N. If we listen 10 times the amount, we would pick up on nuances. We'd pick up on the language they're using. We would hear what's being said. So I could be in your office, Nick, for 3 minutes, and I guarantee I'd get 95% of all of your staff, and I could give them an appropriate present or give them praise in their language. One of the things that's so important to me is that if you're praising your staff, it needs to be in their language. If you're giving them feed forward, notice I didn't say feedback, because monkeys and lions hate the word feedback. It needs to be in their language. Most of the time we're lazy. We just share a global message. We might do a town hall meeting. We'll send out an annual report in one language, and then we wonder why 75% of the world aren't listening.
So does that mean, from your perspective, we'd almost be better off tailoring our meetings and our presentations to each of these individual types, groups, so that actually they are doing the same presentation or whatever it's 4 times so they can hear it?
No, because we just can't do that. That's just not realistic. What you've got to think about is for the lines in the room, that the high achievers, why are we having this meeting? Is it adding value? So I've worked with EasyJet, and EasyJet had a very simple message. Do you want to know their mantra, Nick? It's a little bit rude, but this is their mantra. Bums on seats, okay? If the meeting wasn't going to get more bums on seats, why are we having the meeting? Now, that's classic line language. So the meeting had a vision, and the statement was, if we isn't going to create that, we're not having the meeting, and you have permission to leave. The monkeys need to have some fun. Someone's just asked, is this like color profiling? It is similar. The difference is it doesn't matter what animal you are or what color you are. You have got to become either Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat and wear the coat of many colors, or you've got to become a zookeeper. So Nick, going back to that, you can't have 4 separate meetings because you'd just be in meetings all day long. So very quickly, what you'd want to do is in the first 20 seconds, address the lines and let them know why it's important. You got to make it a little bit fun for the monkeys, and there'll be some chocolate and sweets and minstrels and smarties. That will keep them amused. For the dolphins, fair trade tea. And obviously there's going to be a break after 40 minutes for them to call their family. And for the elephants, they could be there for 7 days without a water break because they just want to lap up the information, and there'll be notes for them. And some people might think I'm being flippant, but if you zookeep your team I promise you, it's life-changing.
So let me ask you one final question, kind of, in terms of actually preparing for this. So if I'm preparing for my meeting, preparing for my speech, have you got any kind of a couple of tips about how I should prepare myself so that actually I structure myself in the right way in order to do that?
So here's the question. If you're thinking we've got 17 people who are high achievers that don't really want to be in the meeting, what information could you give them immediately? So you gave them a sales number. We're up 27%, and I want to congratulate the leading sales team. Then you want to have a funny slide that you've got a Dilbert or you've got on YouTube just to amuse the monkeys, to keep them amused. There's got to be some notes in advance and a white paper and a PDF document afterwards for the elephants. And the dolphins just want to make sure we're all going to get their head tilt together. And if we can do that, you have a team meeting. But no meeting should last longer than 42 minutes because it's just too long. And we'll come back on that if we have enough time.
Nigel, thank you so much for your time. Look forward to you coming back in later. Really appreciate it.
11 minutes. You see, I was in a hurry.
Thanks, Nigel. Next up, host and former economics editor and chief political correspondent for ITV News, Daisy McAndrew is able to confidently facilitate and host a conference, deliver a keynote speech on political and economic movements, share story from her broadcasting career. And today she's going to share with us her wealth of knowledge to teach us how to get your audience on side from the first minute. Welcome, Daisy.
Thank you so much. I feel quite scared going after Nigel.
So Daisy, we've just listened to Nigel talking about, I suppose from your perspective, and you've interviewed the great and good as a facilitator, both live and on television. How do you judge the type of person they are so you can ask them the best question in the right way and extract the best answer from them?
One is working out how to get the best out of your interviewee, which actually ties in a lot with what Nigel was saying, because you're trying to work out what type of person they are and what will work. So if they are that nerd that Nigel was talking about, where it's all about facts and figures, so let's say that might be a banking boss who's perhaps lacking in charisma but does have a lot of gravitas and does like facts and figures, you're trying to make them seem a bit more human whilst impressing them that you know what you're talking about so that they won't talk down to you. So there's lots and lots of that psychology actually that Nigel was talking about. And again, if it's somebody who's lacking in confidence but you know they've got it in them, then you're kind of doing the opposite. You definitely don't want to patronize them because you'll frighten them, you'll unnerve them. So again, you're trying to G them up. A lot of it is like being a good parent or a good teacher, really. It's trying to get the best out of the different personalities you're presented with.
So kind of, I suppose from my perspective, asking you about that, when you are on that live environment, when you're standing in front of a television screen or you're getting up on stage and you're looking at in your audience, do you adjust yourself on how you're going to present to them in real time, or are you focused on what you're delivering, what you've already prepared for yourself in advance, I should say?
So there are two things. One is to read the room, obviously, which is very, very difficult. It's impossible on this format, on a Zoom format. But, hopefully when we do get back to as things used to be, there is a reading the room, and an audience, again, of stockbrokers is going to be very different to an audience, as I did recently, the association of plumbers and engineers. And they will be very different because and their attention spans will be very different, and what they want is very different. So you do kind of have to go try to pitch yourself so that you're representing them. And that's the other bit. You're trying to put yourself forward, but fundamentally you're trying to represent them. So trying to work out what they would be interested in and trying to get that out of the people you're talking to. But again, being forewarned or forearmed is worth its weight in gold. So asking the organizers, is this the kind of audience that would hate it if I swore? Or is this the kind of audience that would think it was quite funny if I threw in the odd swear word? Is this the kind of audience that likes casual, colloquial presentation? Or is this, I did a Saudi bank the other day. You are not going to be swearing or being casual or colloquial with that audience. So again, just tailor making. And I always ask the question of organizers, is there an elephant in the room that I might not be aware of? is there something that was in the company's last books that showed that there was a problem that I need you to tell me so I don't stumble into saying the wrong thing. So I'm really, really upfront in advance about saying, is there anything I need to know? I'm not going to repeat it, just to help me be the best I can be representing you, and so that I know where the bear traps are.
And do you kind of, and you talk about reading the room, and you talk about preparation in advance in terms of speaking to the organizer, when you've done television interviews or kind of in terms of actually understanding the person you're speaking with, although you might be pre-warned or pre-armed about who they are there tricks that you can pick up immediately from those few people, that, or is there one person in a conference you're focused on to gauge their reaction as you start that speech or that presentation?
So there are other things I do. I try to talk to everybody on the day, get them, make them like me. It sounds really, really shallow, but be as charming as I possibly can, be as self-deprecating as I can, try to become their new best friend, because that will help me do the best I can do, because they will then want me to succeed and they'll help me. So if there's something they think I should know, and they'll say, look, you should know this, this woman never draws breath, or, she's really prickly, or she doesn't like this, or he doesn't like that. They will want to be on your side. And I know, you should want everybody to like you, but when you are the host, you really need people to trust you and like you. And I'm astonished at the number of events I do where people will say to me, oh, we had that so-and-so last year. He clearly didn't want to be here. He was clearly bored. He was clearly just doing it for the money. And you think, well, how stupid and short-sighted is that? I mean, they just shouldn't be doing the job. You need to show you're enjoying it. You need to show that you care, and you need to show that you've done your homework.
So I suppose jumping ahead to the end of your session or whatever you've done, how do you judge yourself in terms of whether you've done a good job? Because I know personally, I always beat myself up and always I'm kind of worried that I haven't achieved what I want to achieve. In a live environment, you get obviously the applause that you're getting, and you can take comfort from that. Certainly now in a virtual thing, you have no reaction from the audience. How can you read the room, I suppose, afterwards to know whether or not you've achieved?
I've already made myself sound really needy and pathetic by saying, you want to make everybody love you, but it is really difficult when you're not sure how you've gone down, and you're not sure whether you've done a good job and whether you hit the right note, because so much of it is about those connections, of course, and making people feel that they've done the best they can do. So if you have a panel that's stilted and uncomfortable, and nobody looks like they want to be there, it's your fault as the moderator, because you should have worked this out in advance and made sure that you knew what a really interesting thing that somebody wanted to say was in advance, and that you gave them the opportunity to say it. And again, understanding that different personalities, some people will just talk over other people will wait to be invited, and that's not fair. You have to be the adjudicator, making sure everybody gets an equal opportunity to shine. But again, on these events, there are really interesting sort of tricks that I've learned, like the opening is the worst on these events, because you're kind of going, hello, anybody out there? And you can't see the whites of anybody's eyes. And that's something that actually I've learned now. You need to practice. And it is like being on TV. You need to practice with that bang, here I am, which reassures everybody that you're not uncomfortable, and therefore they don't need to have a bottom clenching moment either when they think, oh God, she doesn't know what she's doing. So you have to go in with maximum energy, so that you're reassuring your audience that they're in safe hands. And the other awkward moment is the goodbye. It's kind of like, well, do I push my button now? Is it over now? And again, you're like, oh, this is embarrassing. So again, a big confident, that's it, guys. So glad you were here. Goodbye. So everybody goes, okay, I can relax now. It's over.
So let me take you back to thank you for that, but let me take you back to the panel. I think we see more and more panels, and we all love panels, and when panels work, they're sensational. From your perspective, as someone who's facilitated loads of these panels, what are you looking for, which will make a great panel?
So I'll tell you some of the things that make my heart sink when I get the briefing. A 45-minute panel of 6 people. It's impossible to get anything beyond a cliche and a soundbite out of 6 people on a panel for 45 minutes. Now, the opposite is also true, that, you know, a panel that's too long and that drags and it is badly prepared is really, really boring. But something where you never get to the meat of the matter, where you never get something that people actually think, that's interesting, I hadn't heard that before, takes a bit of digging, and you have to give people an opportunity to expand on their thinking, on their thoughts, or really explain something properly. So too many people is a killer. Having an imbalance and somebody who's, and again, I always ask in advance, which one of these, and I hate to be sexist about it, but it is normally men, is going to really take some shutting up to allow everybody else to get a word in. Because if I know that, I can be prepared. And also, again, on Zoom, it's different. I'm very, I watch people very carefully to see their reaction to what somebody else is saying, because if they're nodding vigorously, it almost certainly means they've got something interesting to say. And if they're polite, they won't want to interrupt. So I will say, you know, Joe, you were nodding. And so often that's all it takes, just the name, and something interesting will come out. So it's listening and thinking, and not sticking. The danger is you have your preset questions and you just go through them one by one, rather than actually listening to what the panel are saying. And that is difficult sometimes, particularly when the client has said, these are the bullets we want to fire, or these are the issues we want to go through. And you have to just say, I'll do my best. But if I think the conversation is interesting and is going in a different direction, you have to trust me to let it go, which again is why you need a bit of extra time to allow that.
So one last question, and this now from the perspective of one of the panelists who's being hosted by you, and it's something we spoke about when I interviewed you for the book. In terms of their big payoff moment, in terms of the big kind of the thing they really want to speak about, is it something you should hold back and like kind of have the grand finale, or is it something you should get out up front in order to kind of capture the audience's attention?
It depends how good your timing are. The worst thing in the world, and this I think is more relevant now than ever before, than when we're doing events online and remotely, because the danger, if you don't come out with your big guns at the beginning, there's a danger you'll never get there. There's a danger, unless your speech is completely planned and timed to perfection and you're not going to get muted at the last minute, there's a danger you'll never get your big thought out there, which obviously I think is, would be a tragedy. And I've seen that happen to lots of people who just get carried away on all their mini thoughts and never get to the big one, because I've had to shut them up, because I am a real stickler for time. I think it's incredibly rude for people to go over their allotted time, because it messes up the day for everybody else. So I will stop people as politely as I can. So, I mean, I would say come out with the big thought at the beginning and then say it again at the end. If it's that good, it's worth saying twice. And that finishing on a crescendo is really important. It's kind of what I was saying earlier, that thought of when you're in the real world, the audience needs to be told when to clap. They want to be polite, they want to clap you, but if you kind of go, and that's all I've got time for, they don't know that you're saying, please clap me now. You have to end on a punch to allow the audience to do the right thing and be polite.
Daisy, thank you very much. I'll take your advice and I'll make sure we finish with you on time.
And I'm a monkey. I'm definitely a monkey.
Listen, thank you very much. Join us again later when we get to the questions at the end. Next up, SAS operative and star of Channel 4's reality TV drama, SAS Who Dares Win. Conor McLaughlin is our next speaker. Having had both an exciting and varied career, we are honoured to hear his incredible story and some of the lessons in resilience and leadership he's learned and he's going to share with us today. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks very much. Not my most explosive entrance, but that's the world we're in right now. But yeah, very honoured to be among some of these. I think that's one of the beauties about speaking. Sometimes you get to hear other speakers and it helps you sort of hone your own game like you would in any other profession. So it's one of the perks of the job.
So let me take that on. Kind of how important is it to you when you are delivering a speech that you understand what's gone before you, and how much do you adjust your speech to take into account the kind of what the previous speakers have spoken about?
Yeah, I think it goes right back to an initial point about your preparation. And I think most people realise that the military, particularly special forces, training and preparation, your rehearsals, your recce, is all really important, and it helps you in a number of different avenues. So one of them might be knowing the audience. So how is the audience, and what are the parallels? How can I join the dots between special forces and what they're here for and what the message is? Because sometimes that can be totally, off-piste. And I know Nigel talked about, knowing your audience and who's in the room and being able to adjust to that. So it's knowing that if you're going to talk about a male-dominated society, you're talking to people that sort of empathize with that. Because just like Daisy said, you want to create a connection. And so one of the things I do is I get a joke out very early and I make myself seem very vulnerable, because I think sometimes people can have this sort of conceived notion that you're going to come out as this SAS guy and tell them how it's going to be, you're bulletproof, nothing can touch you, and you're brilliant at everything. Whereas if you tell them, you've come out there and you've been scared out your wits end, not knowing what's going on, and managed to scrape through the other end, but here's the reasons why, I think they can empathize with that a lot more. I think training and preparation also helps you, because it helps you. It's like anything. If you do something for the first time, it can be quite daunting. It's that whole unknown thing. Whereas the more preparation you have, that knowledge dispels fear. So I know I'm not going to run over time. I know if technology fails, I can just speak for 40 minutes. I know that if I get asked an awkward question, this is how I'm going to deal with it. So when it happens, it's not the shock of capture. You've prepared yourself in your mind for it, and you're ready to deal with it. So training and preparations goes a long way.
So let me take that to the next step. And kind of one of the things I speak about in the book is around kind of controlling your nerves before you go on stage or you deliver your speech. From your perspective, kind of how do you when you're under pressure situations, and clearly you've been under pressure situations, how do you make sure you are delivering your message both in the best way, but also so everyone can is listening and you're delivering it in a timely fashion, while you also probably your adrenaline's pumping and kind of your head's all over the place a bit?
Yeah, I think nerves are quite healthy. I think everybody would have nerves, and no matter how many talks I've done, no matter how many times I've jumped out an airplane with a parachute, or I've went into battle with live rounds coming the other way, I've always had an element of nerves. And nerves can be quite healthy because they keep you sharp and they keep you in focus about all the things that you need to keep, your ducks in a row. I think one of the important things is you can only control the controllables. So this is what I can control. I can control what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. And then all these other things might happen from a tangent. Your technology might fail, an awkward question, something might not go down well. And again, a lot of that goes back to sort of preparation and that. But I think a lot of it is making these sort of tangible lines of communication with the people you're speaking to, and what is the message you're trying to say. And quite often that's fine for us as speakers, because we've had a call before that. We spoke to the client. We know what it is that they want to speak on, and then I can tailor my stories accordingly. So if that's something about resilience, adapting to change, leadership, I can pick missions that are stereotypical, that tick those boxes, and you tell them. A lot of it goes back to the way you tell a story as well. I remember following on from Sir Clive Woodward, who has a great story about winning the World Cup with England. But it was all about data. It was all about how he managed data, and data can be quite a boring subject. So it's how you tell that story and make it interesting, bring it to life, and bring people in the room with you. When I'm in the jungle and I'm going to rescue the hostages, I want them there beside me, hearing and feeling everything, hearing the bullets go past, so they're in amongst it. And I think you create that sort of environment. Storytelling's a great skill.
So the storytelling, which to me is absolutely critical, you say it's a great skill. Again, from your perspective, is it something you trained yourself to be better at, or is it just because you feel comfortable because the content you are delivering in terms of the story of the jungle, I'd love to hear the story, kind of is your own, and therefore all you're doing is you're reliving your experiences, which means it's like you're in the pub, when we can go to the pub again, with your friend and recounting some stories.
Yeah, I know you touch quite a lot on the art of storytelling in your book, and I think it's really important, particularly for anything. If you want to keep people engaged, And I know we talked about that sort of 40-minute, Nigel touched on, once you get past sort of 40 minutes, people's sort of concentration starts to wane, they drift in and out the room. So I always go sort of up and down. I go from missions to what we learned from it, how we put that into perspective, how it fits in your world, and then back to another mission. So we're on a sort of roller coaster. And as we're going through it, you can't be too descriptive. You've got 40 minutes. And if you're going to talk about maybe 3 different missions, you've got to get through it. So you want as much bang for your buck. So you want to be whistling through it. You know, we did this, we did the briefing, we flew out the hangar and we're all looking at each other, and then we hit the plane. And everyone's like, you know, they're rushing along beside you and they're sort of galloping along beside you on this mission. And it's also got to, it's got to be told in a way they can understand. If I start coming out with military abbreviations, they won't know what it is. And, you know, and that's, I remember telling a story once and I said, I was captured, I was in Iraq, I was blindfolded, handcuffed, I was naked, and then I got butt stroked. And that sent everybody off on a tangent because they were like, oh, butt stroked, what's that? And actually, you know, it's not as exciting as you think. It's just getting hit with a rifle. But you've got to be wary of the language you use, but also be able to just flow along nicely with a story and keep people on board.
Did you, when you kind of, I've got to keep on with that story, did you, did you lose the room when you mentioned about stroke because you could see everyone's eyes wandering? And if you did, how did you bring them back? Did you go and explain what it meant? Because you saw that they were off on a tangent?
Yeah, quite often at the end of, so there's a number of ways you can do the talk. You can do it where you just have questions at the end, or you can do it where at the end of each sort of mission, you're bringing it into line with the company values, perspectives, culture, and this is how you, you know, put it into work in your workspace. And sometimes there's room for questions then. And there might be a couple of people that were like, what does butt stroke mean? And then someone else was like, yeah, I was thinking that. And then I think, right, note to oneself, never use that term again. You know, say something else. And I think you're always learning as a speaker. You're always trying to hone. And you touched on it, Nick, where you're always your worst critic because you always come off it and think, how can I improve that? What went wrong there? You don't focus on all the stuff that went great, even though you might get great feedback, testimonials come flying back. You think, how can I sharpen that? How can I take that out so it never happens again, or whatever? And I think that's a great skill. A lot of people know our ethos in the SAS, our motto, who dares wins. Very few people know our ethos, which is the continuing and unrelenting pursuit of excellence. You're never perfect, but you keep chipping away, you keep striving for it, you keep reaching for it. And I think that's a great notion to have.
So can I ask just about that briefly? You've got a team of experts, of highly, highly skilled individuals, and their ethos is to continue to strive to be better. How do they, when they first join, how do you get them to that level? And they think kind of they join the SAS, therefore they're the best of the best of the best. How do you bring them down to a level of understanding that they can always get better? Is it something that comes naturally? And we go back to Nigel and the personalities, or is it something that actually you need to recondition yourself?
I think one of the earliest tricks they do is that they'll show you this is how it should be done, and this isn't perfect. And they'll show you the experts that will go and take a house down in like 48 seconds. And then it's like, okay, how do we get there? And how do we improve on that? And quite often when we have a counter-terrorist situation, we always have 2 ways of doing it: a deliberate action and immediate action. And a deliberate action, that's the plan. That's what we're going to do, ground time of our choosing. But we need an immediate action. What we're going to do if they start killing hostages right now, because those plans are going to be different for obvious reasons. Now, we know those plans, but we know because we've done them 100 times. And we're not afraid to fail. We learn from failure. So we try that, we try something a bit different out the box. It doesn't work. We take stuff from it and we go again. And we keep doing it until we're honed, until there's no way. These are the 2 best ways of doing it. And we've shaved every second off that we can, because lives matter in our world. So marginal gains are really important.
And for you, kind of in the world of speaking, when you started delivering your speeches, do you take that methodology and take that ethos into your speaking and kind of set yourself up to be your harshest critic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important. And I think that you can get too much, you can get consumed with it, and you've only got so much time you can apportion to it. But I think the more stuff that you've done prior, the more likely you are to get where you need to be on the day of the races. Because remember, when you're speaking, it's a bit like being an elite athlete. It's a bit like when you're a presenter or a host or you're a sports team. You've only got a very short space of time in the arena. So all the work that you can do around the outside will give you the best chance of success when it comes to, right, the starter gun goes off, or right, we're here in the room and we're setting a host. So it's exactly the same principles.
Colin, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Join us again for the panel. Thank you, sir. And also thank you for the best segue into our next speaker, because you mentioned elite athlete, member of sports team and presenter, and as a member of the 2014 World Championship England Rugby Women's team, Maggie Alfonsi has become a household name and is one of the UK's leading TV rugby analysts. Can't wait to hear about her inspiring journey to the top of the game, some tactics for performing under pressure, and how she faces her challenges head on. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the introduction there. You forgot the word legend. People usually say the legend Maggie Alfonsi is going to speak today.
I was going to round up, and thank you so much for the legend, Maggie. But
there we go.
So, Maggie, your journey fascinates me because obviously playing in a sport, communication is absolutely critical. You're there with people, and and it's a highly intensive sport, rugby, and you have that in your part of a team. And then you became kind of a TV presenter where you're kind of in front of a camera and you're not getting the reaction, and the communication you're having is different. And to me, that's a parallel to where we all are now, going from the physical meeting space to these virtual meeting spaces. So can you just spend a couple of minutes talking to us about how you've had to adapt your communication and your kind of from that team environment of everyone being together to this world where you're talking to a camera and you have no response or back to you or anything like that?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And I think Daisy mentioned it previously. It's all about how you learn that you're not getting the feedback that you want. So obviously in the physical world, when we stand up and we speak, especially when I speak to my team, I know that the reaction is very much going to guide me. So if they're very engaged, I know I give them maybe a little bit less. If they're not engaged, I give them a bit more. And then when you move to the virtual world, especially when you're doing broadcasting, where I'm effectively talking to a camera, and obviously there's millions of people behind that camera watching me, I have to really think about how am I going to engage them without seeing that feedback. So one of the things that I do quite a lot is that I make sure that I change obviously the pitch in my voice. So when I really want to be enthusiastic, I really give that. And when I'm trying to produce a really serious point, I might lower that tone and speak with calm. And I also think it's quite important to make sure that you're very authentic with what you're saying. So especially when you're speaking to something that you can't see that feedback, you really have to make sure that you're not providing or producing a false representation of yourself. So I really try and be authentic all the time and try and speak with passion. I think it's hard, but at the same time, that as long as you're engaging those who you're speaking with on that broadcasting team, then that you're probably having that same effect with the people who are watching it at home. And you have to really treat the viewers almost like you're speaking to them in the pub or having that general conversation. You have to be very relaxed, very authentic, speak with purpose, but at the same time, make sure that you really want to emphasize things that you really want to get across.
And do you, when you've got a point to make, are you thinking consciously about the controversy of the point, or is it about the analytical element of the whole thing in terms of how much you're influenced by the viewers or how much you're influenced about actually your authenticity of what you want to say?
It's very difficult. It's a bit of both. So you have to really be conscious about what the viewer will be thinking. So if there's a very controversial point, so let's say in the world of rugby, someone's got a red card, and actually the way that individual got the red card was they probably didn't deserve that red card. So I've got to think straight away, if I was a spectator watching it at home, how would I view that action on TV? Would I say that's a red card? Would I say that's a yellow card? Or would I say actually no card is needed for that? So I put myself in the view and in the position of an audience member. And then I use that as my guidance rather than going, okay, right, I am an expert in the field and I'm going to analyze it from my perspective, because actually that's not always the best way. Start off from the viewer's perspective and then bring your own understanding, your own expertise into it. So I try and steer it like that. And actually, regardless of what you say, with most points, generally half people like what you say and agree with you, half people disagree with you. So you're always going to get that balance really. But again, that's why I say, make sure you're authentic with what you're doing. So take it from the position of the viewer and then make sure you put your own opinion on it, because you do not want to sit on the fence, especially in the world of broadcasting. If you sit on the fence, people get very upset with that. So you've got to be one or the other. And I find, especially in sport, you really have to be quite strong with your point. And, I work in an industry, it's pretty much male dominated. And being a female, I think it's even more important that I stake my thoughts and my opinions to make sure that actually I'm having a relevance on that panel.
So when you started out your broadcasting career and as a female in a male-dominated broadcasting setting, did you how much preparation work did you do beforehand to get those people who you were going to be in the studio on side with you? Or were you confident in terms of your background and I suppose your credibility as a leading rugby superstar legend, that actually they should give you that credibility?
So Nick, I'll be open and honest. To start off with, in the world of broadcasting, when I came into it in 2015, I felt that I had to basically read an encyclopedia on rugby, even though I'd been playing the sport for probably about 13, 14 years. I'd won a Rugby World Cup. I still felt to myself going into that environment, I didn't know rugby. And I was working on men's rugby. So there was a perception that as a woman working on men's rugby, what would I know? So I went out of my way to almost do too much prep. And actually, as a result of that, when I went in front of the camera, I lost the Maggie. I lost myself. I just basically read out what I had written down prior to that. And that wasn't who I wanted to be. And one of the best quotes, or one of the best points that I got from the ITV broadcaster, mainly the producer, he said to me, Maggie, you know, when we work on free to air, it is we're a broadcaster. We're about trying to get as many viewers, and we're trying to get as many people to watch the sport. We're not a narrowcaster. We're not going to very much base it down to simple opinions, simple views. It's not about trying to show off your expertise. Actually, it's about trying to get as many people to want to watch our sport and engage with the game. And that really stuck with me. So now, you know, it's many years, obviously, since I first started broadcasting, but now I approach it completely differently. So I do my prep. Obviously, you must always do preparation, as all the panelists have already highlighted. But now I try and think, again, I'm trying to be like the viewer, and I'm trying to think like the viewer a bit more, and again, show a bit more of myself rather than be the person who's very formal, who likes to, you know, read all the papers and all the books, and actually try and be more yourself. But the preparation that I do when it comes to broadcasting is I do work very hard to try and build a relationship with the other people who are going to be in the studio with me. So I know that when I build that relationship with them, they're more likely to have that conversation, they're more likely to feel relaxed. And you know, some of the points Daisy raised as well, you know, for me, the green room is probably the most important section of my work before I go onto TV, because if I don't build that relationship with the other people who are going to be in the studio with me, I know that when I become on air, it's going to be very, very hard to try and engage with them and also, you know, show my true self.
So let me just ask you again, in the virtual world we're now in, where the green room doesn't necessarily happen like it used to when you went out to a physical event. Are there any tips you can help with kind of any of the audience today who are event organisers in terms of how they can give you that environment to kind of be part of the whole event rather than just the session that you're logging on for?
So I guess one thing I found through the virtual space is actually that first 15 minutes before you actually go on air is the most biggest bit. So obviously for us, our panelists here today, we logged on 15 minutes beforehand. And for me, I think that's incredibly important. So I would ask organisers to make sure you schedule that in, you know, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it may be, to give the time for the other panelists or whoever you're having be the speaker, engage with them, build that relationship. I do appreciate sometimes as a speaker, you want to use the 15 minutes beforehand just to sort of think about in a bit more detail the sort of key messages that you're going to get across. But I have noticed that 15 minutes beforehand is such a nice time just to relax yourself, to understand the key messages that the client really wants to get out from you. So I would make sure that organizations build that into the preparation time and the delivery time. So don't just sort of wait for them to come on air 5 minutes beforehand, actually really build in 15 minutes, 30 minutes beforehand, so you can get either panelists or the speaker to speak with various different people, just to relax them, but also to maybe reinforce any key messages as well.
Maggie, one final question for you, kind of good time and everything. And it's something you mentioned earlier in terms of how you react to the people in the studio with you. And I think we are starting to see, and hopefully as things start opening up in the near future, kind of this concept about hybrid events where you might have a few people with you in the studio and you're delivering out to the wider audience kind of virtually. And I suppose my question to you is, kind of, you mentioned the fact that you are related to the people in the audience, in the studio with you, is how do you balance up that conversation where you are directly talking to the people who are there, knowing that potentially the audience are looking for something different? Where is your focus?
Oh, that's a very good question. I guess when it comes to So let me put it into perspective. So when you're in the studio, the reality is everyone who's in the studio has their sort of own agenda, and they go into the show sort of knowing what they really want to get across. So I think Daisy mentioned it as well. You know when you're a panelist, you have maybe your big points that you really want to get across. And actually, I find that in the studio, every individual who's on the couch usually has something they really want to get across. And I think it's important that you strike that balance between, I want to get this point across, but at the same time, I need to really speak to the viewer and understand what the viewer really wants. So there's a bit of balance, but I guess the way I tend to work is that I make sure that if I'm going to make a big point, make it early, because generally what you find in TV in particular, with all the commercial adverts that we have, there's very little time to get your point across. And if you miss that window, the amount of times I've kicked myself and gone, oh, I wish I'd said that at the start, because now it's not relevant. So I always try and make sure that I get my big point across early on, but then at the same time, like you've already highlighted, I try and make sure I get a good understanding about what would the viewer want? You know, I've got friends who are watching the game at the moment or who are watching the program. What would they be thinking? What would they want from me? So I try and get that balance. But, you know, at the same time, you can't be dictated by always the audience. You've got to really make sure that you go in being quite confident about what you want to get across and how you want to deliver your content.
The legend that is Maggie Alfonsi, thank you so much indeed. Thank you everyone who joined us. That concludes this afternoon's event. If you'd like any more information about the speakers this afternoon, please contact us. We're delighted to help. Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of the day.